Support for Lab Out Loud is brought to you by the National Science Teachers Association. Find out more at nsta.org. This episode of Lab Out Loud is sponsored by Texas Instruments. Did you know that the TI graphing calculators your students use in math have a ton of uses for the science classroom too? From data collection to coding and cool simulations, visit education.ti.com to learn more. You're listening to the Lab Out Loud podcast, Science for the Classroom and Beyond. And in today's episode, we're looking at movies and television and the science inside those shows we love.
There's science and math everywhere in the world if you're just looking for it. And I've had people ask me, like, can you enjoy a show at all? And if I'm enjoying the story, I'm not thinking about the science stuff as much. But then I'll also think, well, hey, is this something I could write about? And for me, part of the enjoyment is thinking about the science in movies.
That's up next on Lab Out Loud, but first, I'm your co-host Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartell.
And you know what came in the mail recently, Brian?
A package from Amazon, because I got one of those today.
Oh, now that school's back in session, things have settled down, but the back-to-school shopping at my house has shifted from trips to Target the way it was in the olden days to the poor post office, and I mean it is their job, so I guess it's good business.
Well, those
for
are
them,
just
but,
those are just school supplies for your kids. But like, there's times where we'll go out to a store like Target or something, and there's a significant portion of my cart that's for my wife's classroom. I love you, my wife, but
well, my wife's office looked like a shipping and receiving department for shoes and folders and all that good stuff. Shoes.
Oh, for
kids'
the kids.
Shoes.
For the kids.
Yeah,
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, your home office, not her school office.
No, her home office. Yeah, and because it's right by the door, and so all this stuff gets shipped in, and it's all these school supplies. And in the latest NSTA reports, the September NSTA reports, which I'm flipping through, that comes in the mail for NSTA members. One of the stories is very similar to a previous episode we did on June 4th. And it is a survey. NSTA always does a survey. And most teachers are paying out of pocket for school supplies. And they kind of go through the stats there. I'm curious to see where our listeners are.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all, yeah.
Yeah. We did an episode that kind of dug into the data and how this affects... we didn't do the data, but our guests did. They dug into the data and did a survey and measured how this affects a science classroom, because science in particular, if you're buying supplies, science class needs a lot more than some other classes. So there's some big heavy items in there. The next page, though, or a couple pages later, they have Money 101 in NSTA reports. And this is where I got the math wrong the other day. If you set aside the average is 500... You did, Brian.
Thank you.
The average amount of spent on teachers spend on the classroom is $479. Now, our guests in episode 188, the June 4th one, they said it was around $500 for science, and it's kind of the same in all fields. This article on Money 101 goes through and says if you put that away, if you put $500 a year away for 25 years, that would be how much, Brian?
$27,000.
No, initially, if you just put it away,
$12,500.
Be $12,500, but compound interest at 6%. Put that in a retirement account, and that would be $27,432. So
that's amazing. That's a car.
I know.
That's a new car.
It's kind of crazy, actually.
Yeah.
So I really liked that discussion we had in that previous episode, because it kind of gets to the root of some of the problems with the science budget and those kinds of things, and it's it's not an easy problem to solve.
Think about if everyone in a building, now I know this is an average, but on average, let's say you spend $500 in a building, and let's say it's a small building and you just have 10 teachers. That's significant right there. But then now magnify that to a building of 100 teachers. If everyone's spending about $500, I mean, wow, that boggles the mind.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. Well, flipping through the NSTA flipping through the NSTA reports, I also get to the page for save the date. October 11th through the 13th is a regional conference, NSTA conference in Reno, Nevada. Anybody in the area heading to that? Brian and I are not. That's a little too soon for us. But we are hoping to go to the national in St. Louis.
We're planning on
March
yeah.
April or March 2019. We'll have more details come out later. But there are some conferences. If you head over to the NSTA website, check out their conferences pages. There's a lot of options on there. And you wonder why I'm digging page by page.
You can hear the page turning.
I know.
Are you doing it louder just for emphasis, or is that just normal page turning noise?
It could be a little bit of Foley artists. I believe that's what they call Foley artists, where they do the sound effects. If I want to break a bone, they twist celery. Did you ever see that?
Oh, really?
Yeah. When they do your Steven Seagal bones breaking movie, they'll take celery in front of the microphone. I think it's funny. Anywho, speaking of movies, there is a column in the NSTA reports that people probably check out once in a while, and it's called Blick on Flicks. And guess what? We got Blick.
Yeah, we finally decided to do a crossover. So we, he has a podcast himself, and we decided, hey, let's come together and do a conversation with all three of us.
Yep, and so here's a chance to find out who's behind Blick on Flicks.
My name is Jacob Clark Blickenstaff. I've been writing a column and a podcast for NSTA reports called Blick on Flicks for about 10 years now. And in my day job, I work on a project called Hacking STEM in Microsoft Education.
Blick on Flicks is one of those titles that just writes itself, doesn't it?
Yes, I did not come up with it. I don't know who in the NSTA list of employees I owe that credit to, but somebody said, hey, that's a good title. And okay,
you should just claim it as your idea now from moving on.
Yeah.
Trademark.
Yeah, I can probably do that.
Well, you have over 100 episodes, I've noted, and we have to look for new content, but new content probably just kind of screams out at you.
Sure.
And do you get a tax write-off for going to the movies too?
Ooh,
I do.
That's a writer?
I get to count it as a business expense. Yes, that's true. Just the ones when I go to write a review. But yeah,
no way,
Dale. We're in the wrong podcast.
Okay, well, after the show, we're gonna have a little. That's pretty sweet. So, the funny thing is, I just got in the mail my NSTA reports. And your column is right at the back, and it was Ready Player One of my favorite movies for the summer.
Favorite books?
Yeah, favorite book, too. I did read the book prior. That's one of those movies where you read the book, and then you're like, oh, gosh, how are they going to do this as a movie? And, some people are like, well, I like the movie better, but there's a lot there to fill in. There's a lot to squeeze into that.
Yeah, there is a lot. And I have to admit that this is one where I had not read the book first. I think I kind of regret that. There are others where one of my very first columns was actually Jumper. And that was a lot of fun because shortly after that column posted, the author of the book sent me an email and said, hey, I liked your review, and I agree with these things that they did in the movie that messed up what I had written in the book. So
that's cool.
That was kind of fun to have. It's been neat every once in a while to get to have some connections with either the folks that create the book or create the movie, or the scientists if I'm writing about documentaries. I do a documentary every once in a while, and I got to have a conversation with a woman who studies lemurs in Madagascar. I got to talk to one of the writers of Coco about a year and a half ago when I was writing that column. So that's been one of the side benefits I was not expecting of getting to do this column, of getting to connect with some of the actual creators of the content and hear back from them. Usually with, hey, that was a cool thing. Every once in a while, like, you kind of messed up on this. Like, I heard back from Mythbusters when I mistakenly called Carrie, Byron, and Tori, I called them Myth Turns by mistake, and they were like, no, they are co-hosts.
Yeah.
No, that's the wrong word. So,
there was a period where they were kind of hazy on their role.
Yeah.
I noticed that. So
do you use the strategy to actually make someone angry to get their attention, and then you'd be like, oh yeah, now they want to talk to me.
That would be good. I haven't planned that far ahead yet in doing that, but yeah, that's a good strategy too.
Well, that'd be a good question that's been on our mind. How do you pick your shows? Because it's not just flicks. I noticed like you did the Netflix the Lost in Space just recently too. So you do TV shows also. How do you pick them?
Yep. So I work with the editor of Reports, Lynn Petrenjak, and she and I have an exchange every month, and I often look at, well, what's coming up in IMDb has this cool page where you can look at what movies are coming out over the next several months. And so kind of look at that and propose 2 or 3 to Lynn, and we kind of think about, well, what have I done recently? Have I done a lot of animated movies lately? Have I done a lot of action films lately? Because one of the things that I really try to do is point out that you don't always have to look at science fiction or action movies to find science in movies. There are things in romantic comedies. There's things in kids' movies. There's things in just general. I wrote about the Fame movie because there's science and physics and dancing. So I really want, from the beginning, I wanted my column to be about there's science and math everywhere in the world if you're just looking for it, and not get myself stuck in a rut of only always doing sci-fi movies or action movies.
That can be easy to fall into those.
Yeah, and it's also easy. I have a physics background. I was a physics major. I was a high school physics teacher. We're really good at being know-it-alls, those of us in the physics realm. And it's really easy to fall in the trap of always wanting to correct people and say, hey, you got this thing wrong. Oh,
well, actually, no, just kidding.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the things my wife mentioned when we had like department parties or something. She's like, I just don't want to go and get corrected by people. My grammar is okay. But
that's a bummer.
Well, yes. It's not necessarily better in technology, by the way. In any case, so what are some of the surprising things you learned when doing like a rom-com or something like that?
So, a classic early one for me was I wrote about The Devil Wears Prada. So there's often there's a shot that shows up in lots and lots of movies where somebody's riding in a car and they're looking out the window. It's nighttime, and at the same time you can see the person's face and you also see the reflection of the buildings that they're going by. That's in Devil Wears Prada. It's in a lot of other movies. Well, there's a ton of physics to thinking about. Well, why can I see through the glass, but also the reflection at the same time? And why do you see into a house when it's dark out but light inside? But if you're inside the house and you look out at night, you just see the reflection.
Sure.
And it's about, which area is brighter, which area is dimmer, and then how much of each of those surfaces is reflecting and transmitting, because you've got 2 surfaces of glass there. And a person inside the car, and then the things outside. So often there's things about reflection and transmission in movies like that. Devil Wears Prada also, it was cool to talk about the pressure under a high-heeled shoe versus the pressure under a flat shoe. If you do the calculation, there's actually more pressure under a stiletto heel than there is under an elephant's foot.
It's like the reverse bed of nails kind of example.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. You don't want to lie down on a bed of spike heels, probably. So that was something I brought up with Wonder Woman a couple of summers ago. Was awesome. She's picked up that tank. She's holding it up. But the entire mass of that tank, the entire weight of that tank is focused on her 2 boots. There aren't many roads that will actually hold up that, a 30-ton tank with all of its weight concentrated on, 100 square centimeters.
Yeah, so you can say she's Wonder Woman and she gets a pass, but
right.
What about the road?
That's is it Wonder Road as
Wonder
well?
Wonder Road? Oh.
Yeah. Is the road made out of vibranium or unobtainium or something like that?
Does Wonder Woman have some sort of bubble around her that shifts the physics of the things she interacts with? That's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
See, that's where Ready Player One, when it's in a virtual world, can really get around some of that because, of course, they can change the rules, of course.
And you talked a little bit about making parallels in your recent column about Ready Player One, having the sensation of falling if you can be, because in the movie, people that haven't seen the movie, I'm not ruining it, they're in those little suspension devices and stuff. And I thought they did a pretty good job with that. Did you?
Decent, especially in those folks in the world of Ready Player One who have enough money to buy a really fancy rig, then the rig is better able to make their physical sensation match what they're seeing in their virtual world. The folks who don't have that kind of money just have a glove and a headset, right? And maybe some version of a treadmill that goes in any direction. That treadmill is not going to help you when you're meant to be floating around in a 0G kind of experience. Your body is still going to feel its own weight. And I think that would be tremendously disorienting. There's some issues with people doing virtual reality where they get motion sick, in part because of that disconnect between the headset is telling you that you are moving and your body is telling you, nope, you're not moving. You are standing still in this space, or you're sitting in this chair.
Yeah.
And that
one of the things is the display isn't moving at the speed your head's moving. So the early ones struggled with that. And I think they're trying to remedy that by putting cameras on the outside of the headset to map the actual world to see if they can correct that. But it's still not going to take care of the problem that you're actually not running.
Yeah.
Or
you're in a 1G environment, but the simulator is showing you a 0G environment. You're going to have a problem with that unless you submerge your person in water, and then you get other challenges with your electronic devices. Work submerged in water.
Now, was there a movie that you went and saw? I'm going to say movie, but it could be a TV show. But a movie you went and saw and thought, all right, I'm going to do this movie. It is going to be terrible. And you were pleasantly surprised.
Oh, that's a great question. I will say that the standard of whether a movie is good or terrible is sort of like good for writing a column about, terrible for writing a column about, good movie to actually watch versus terrible movie in terms of entertainment value. It's easier to think of the movies that I've gone into thinking, I hope this is good, and then I'm like, do I have to sit through the whole rest of this movie to
because you committed to a column?
Yes. Unfortunately, in that category is Kong Skull Island, which there was plenty to write about, but it was an absolutely dreadful movie.
Yeah, I did not like that movie at all.
I did not see it, and I
don't bother.
It's not going to worry about it.
You know, the thing is, my teenage boys loved it.
Sure.
And I have to appreciate it at that level. Another movie that's similar, Giant Ape, is Rampage. Have you seen that yet?
I have not seen Rampage.
See, I'm wondering if Rampage, my two boys wanted to see Rampage, and we were flying home on Air Alaska, and they had it on the in-flight on your device. Yep. And my iPad, they were watching it on my iPad, and I was like, oh, take a screenshot of that, because the first opening talks about CRISPR and things, and I'm like, you're going to try to put the real world and the crazy giant flying wolf world together here? Because that's based on a video game, but just loosely video. So that could be another one. We're actually going to be talking about CRISPR in another show, so I took that screenshot to show it to Brian, because I know he likes the topic.
Cool. Well, one of the fun things about writing about Kong Skull Island was to do the research of how many different sizes Kong has been in all the different movies since you go back to the 1930s with the first King Kong. And also that in most of the movies, Kong does not remain a consistent size from shot to shot, just because
it's not as exciting.
But when you have King Kong in the jungle, you can make him look pretty big by just making him tree-sized. But if you take a tree-sized King Kong and put him in New York City, he looks tiny because the buildings are so much bigger than trees. So King Kong generally gets bigger when he gets into the city environment, just so that he looks more scary.
Now, how'd you do the research on that?
So I went back and looked at the clips from different of those movies, and then you can find something that's a reference scale, like a person, something next to them. And then, okay, the King Kong in this movie, he seems to be about, 14 feet tall. I think the smallest Kong is in Peter Jackson's Kong. That's like, he's the most.
Yeah, he fits in an auditorium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Kong Skull Island is by far the largest one, because he's meant to be something ridiculous, like 100 feet tall or something.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to go from hobbits to Kong, so I mean, maybe that's...
It was an intermediate species.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Craziness of movie makers don't kind of get the idea that mass scales with the cube of the...
Yep.
And strength of muscles and bones only goes with the square. So you have the problem that you make these creatures that couldn't actually move. And the other thing in the Kong one that I did was what kind of caloric intake would Kong need to survive? And about the only thing I could feature that he could possibly eat was dates, because they're ridiculously calorie dense. And so, if he was eating dates, I did a calculation of how many tons of dates he would have to eat every day. And it leads to some very bad outcomes on the other end of Kong, if you think about it.
That's what I was thinking, yeah. Now, are these situations where you would be doing these calculations regardless of having the column, because you get sucked into it?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it's been long enough that I kind of just think about that stuff when I'm going to the movies. And I've had people ask me, can you enjoy a show at all?
Can you turn it off, right?
And, I mean, I watch murder mystery shows and, other sci-fi things. And if I'm enjoying the story, I'm not thinking about the science stuff as much. But then I'll also think, well, hey, is this something I could write about? And for me, part of the enjoyment is thinking about, well, would this planet actually work with, if you're looking at Avatar, almost every animal we see in Avatar is a predator. And that runs into a problem if you just want to think about how an ecosystem is going to work. Wait a minute, they're only predators? Well, who's eating all these plants? And how are you have a whole planet full of apex predators? That runs into some,
It's a moon.
In Avatar,
it is.
They're on a moon.
Actually.
Yeah, they're on.
It's not a planet. Just wanted to clarify. No,
I actually got the Avatar book. Also a physics teacher.
That's right.
In the book, they have the gravitational field strength for the moon, and so you could do different. The scene where he's lifting.
They had
weights.
A rundown of the species too, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The book's really actually kind of neat. It goes through all the. But the Navi's math and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Look carefully, though, unless they have fixed it in an earlier version of at least what was online for that Pandora book to go with Avatar, they had created a kind of crazy planet where I don't remember exactly what it was. The density was greater than Earth, but the gravity was less and the diameter was the same. Or the density, diameter, and gravitation didn't all line up.
I do remember that because we were doing universal gravitation law, and it came up in that because they're these numbers don't seem to be in the right table.
Right.
Yeah.
So that satisfied my physicist know-it-all there, but
We'll be back with more Blick on Flicks after this break. Looking for easy ways to do STEM in your middle grades and high school science classes? Texas Instruments has free lessons and resources to help you take advantage of the graphing calculators your students already use. From learning the basics of coding and writing fun programs on the calculators, to adding TI Innovator technology, motors, sensors, and more to build exciting real-world models, or even give your students an easy on-ramp to robotics. TI is a one-stop shop for doing STEM. With resources for the classroom, after-school clubs, and special STEM events, TI reps are ready to help you plan the most successful projects for your students, and even loan you technology to do it. Visit education.ti.com/STEM or contact your local TI rep today to learn more. And now, back to the show.
So have you gotten a lot of feedback from teachers or students who use your content in class?
I have not yet heard from a student, though I don't have that many times that I get to interact with many students. I do occasionally, just last week I was in New York City to do a professional development event for folks with this Microsoft job I'm doing now. And one of the teachers said, "You write that column? I love that column. Can I bring in a copy of reports and have you sign it?"
Oh, so cool.
I had a teacher, that was kind of surprising, little fun thing. And occasionally I'll have teachers, if I go to NSTA, and I've given talks at a couple of NSTA conferences, and then I'll have folks come up and tell me that they've been using the column. And I appreciate that. That's really nice to hear. It's certainly much nicer to hear from folks who say, I've been using your column, than the ones who say, you know what, I found this mistake, where I do make mistakes in my column, and I do try to correct them when they come up.
Sure. So if you have students or teachers that are interested in critically analyzing media for scientific, errors, what would you give them as okay, you talked about like the glass and reflection in the car, and what are there other like gateway scenes that we should all keep an eye on?
Yes.
The gold was one that always gets me.
That's mine, massive gold. Yeah.
Massive gold. Yeah. Gold is heavier than you think, and there's also less of it in the world than you think. So pretty hard to actually dip smog entirely in gold if Middle Earth is an earlier version of Earth.
Yeah.
And,
wait, is it?
I don't know. That's a great question. That's an interesting question. Some people believe that yes, Middle Earth is another version of Earth, but I don't know. But in any event, if you're going to dip smog in gold, Middle Earth has way more gold on it than the Earth does, because there's what the number is, a cube 60 feet on a side, 20 meters on a side, is all the gold on Earth. And they've got a lot more than that when they dip smog in there. But sorry, to go back to your general things to look for, scaling is always an issue anytime you make things small or big. Like, how are you scaling the mass and the volume of the thing? Another classic, a more physics thing is impulse and momentum.
Yeah. So
force times time equals change in momentum. And momentum is always conserved. It's a conservation, it's one of our conservation laws. As long as you don't have any external forces, momentum is conserved. So superheroes are often really good at throwing very big, very heavy things long distances. Awesome. But usually there's no acknowledgement for the fact that when you throw something really big and really heavy in one direction, you're going to go the other direction unless there's something attaching you to the ground really strongly. So, Dr. Octopus throws bags of change at Spider-Man when he's standing in leather shoes on a perfectly smooth, shiny floor. He should be going back the other way, because he's basically making himself into a rocket, because he's throwing stuff one way. And or there was the Will Smith. What was that? He was a superhero, reluctant superhero.
Carved onto the moon and stuff like that.
Yeah, he throws a whale like very early in the movie. He like stands on the beach
back into the ocean.
Yeah, flings a whale back into the ocean. It's like he ought to go the other direction, just like a gun has recoil. When you fling something fast one way, you have to react going the other way. What
I struggle with is if it's a superhero movie. But if it's like the Fast and Furious movie, those are humans.
Yeah.
And how could they possibly have accelerations that they have? I mean, they smash into each other mid-air. Mission Impossible 2, I think, was notorious for that, where they're on two motorcycles and then like jump in midair and the bodies collide.
Turn around, yeah.
And I'm like, how many broken ribs? That is the least of your worries.
Yep. Yeah, there's certainly, even in movies that aren't supposed to be superheroes, the hero often recovers from injuries remarkably quickly. You go all the way back to Die Hard, like he walked across broken glass early on in the movie, and yet that doesn't seem to be an issue later on. Like,
that's.
If you've ever stepped on just a little piece of broken glass, you.
I mean, you think Legos are tough? Come
on. What movies have gotten it right? Like I've you notice things here and there. Like the reboot of Star Trek.
Yep.
They had someone like flying out of one of the earlier ships, and all of a sudden they get into space and it's dead quiet. I mean, those kind of things you appreciate a little bit because it's like, oh yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be. Have other places taken the leads on like, oh yeah, they've gotten it right.
I would say if you want sci-fi that tries to really do a nice job, I would say Moon is another one.
Oh, that's a good movie.
Yeah.
That's a good movie. I wasn't expecting that one to be as good as it was when I went to it, but back to your question earlier about that. So Moon is awesome. They also do a nice job. The Martian basically does a lot really well. I did have a couple of little things to say, and I actually a year after The Martian came out, I had the chance to be on a panel at a physics teacher conference with a scientist from JPL who tested the potato problem. Like she wondered if you expose potato plants to Martian atmosphere for 24 hours, will it actually kill them? Turned out it didn't kill them. Nearly all of them came back again. So,
you mean when the airlock breaks and all the plants are dead?
Yep. So,
I thought it was because they froze.
Even the temperature that they got to, for the time it was, that plants are surprisingly resilient to freezing, and it's also not vacuum as another issue. Like there's a difference between Martian atmosphere and vacuum. So had those plants been exposed to vacuum and freezing temperatures, probably they would have died. But at least
it'll really destroy your spirit.
I actually met Andy Weir this summer at an ISTE conference in Chicago. And one of the things I learned, I didn't know this until just the summer, just a couple of months ago, is that there is an education-friendly version of The Martian. They've taken out some of the, the more colorful language.
Oh,
and
really?
so you can, there's a classroom edition now. So
they did that with Avatar, too.
Yeah. So you can read it in class, and I think there's some great science. Like as a chemistry teacher, when I first read it,
they took it out of the book.
The book, yes. They take out the colorful language out of the book, so you can read it in class, get a classroom set, and go over some of those problems in chemistry or physics or what have you.
Because the movie Avatar, there's a cleaner. There's a clean disc.
Oh,
I mean, not that there's a ton of swearing in that movie, but they take it out. They change it.
One of the things I love about The Martian is the idea that he's solving problems. He's approaching all of these problems with a scientist and engineering frame of mind, and he's repurposing things in ways they were not originally designed, which actually is a lot of what the job I do now with Microsoft, and it's a project called Hacking STEM, is about. This kind of hacking is not getting into somebody's account, but how do you take something and use it in a different way? How do you adapt something for a different use? And so he's doing that all through The Martian. He's taking something and figuring out how to use it in a way it wasn't originally designed. I only the way I heard about The Martian was from one of my favorite webcomics is called XKCD.
Oh yeah.
And one of his comics a couple of years before the movie came out was, this is the movie for the people that their favorite scene in Apollo 13 was, you have to make this fit into this with this pile of things.
The CO2 scrubbers.
If that was your favorite bit of Apollo 13, then this is the book and movie for you, because it's 90 minutes or more of just that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's interesting because his second book, Artemis, which is not nearly as popular, is he tried to get that even more scientifically accurate than the first, than in The Martian there, and he actually challenged people to find mistakes in it, and but that didn't get as much popularity, so everyone still defaults to The Martian.
Sure.
Yeah, I haven't read Artemis, but I'll check it out. Put it on my list.
Yeah, do you do books at all? Do you review other media?
I've done
hip hop rock songs.
The only music I've done is They Might Be Giants, Here Comes Science. So,
we had them on the show.
Yeah,
they're great.
I like them a lot. I was surprised when I heard them on something else. You know, they've got their Element song. They had not heard of Tom Lehrer's Element song like before somebody else pointed it out to them. They're like, what?
Oh, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
But now I've liked They Might Be Giants since Particle Man and all that back in the 80s. But my kids have listened to Here Come the ABCs and Here Come the 1, 2, 3s and Here Comes Science, and they know they've heard me sing A Shooting Star is not a star is not a star at all more than once when I'm playing.
We took our kids to the concert.
Sweet. Yeah, they do kid-friendly concerts and not kid-friendly concerts.
Yeah. How nerdy is that? You take them to the Here Comes Science concert.
They're just building their fan base. I think that was
their first concert, too. Mission accomplished, parenthood.
Yep. Well, working at the Science Center, Pacific Science Center for a few years was pretty awesome for getting to just take my kids in the back door of the Science Center. And they get to meet the people who take care of the creatures we have here and, just all kinds of...
So you do have a new job now, and there might be some things that our listeners might be interested in terms of teaching science that relate to what you do on a daily basis.
Yeah. So Hacking STEM is a project in education at Microsoft that has the goal of democratizing STEM education. So making STEM education accessible to as many people as possible by removing economic barriers and software and hardware barriers. So the big idea is that if you've got Office on your computer and you've got Excel, you can download a little plugin called Data Streamer. And with that in free download, Excel can then accept live data coming in from a sensor. And then
what kind of sensors?
So mostly sensors that we have kids or teachers build and then plug in through an Arduino or other microcontroller like a microbit or an Arduino. So if you look on the website Hacking STEM, you can search for Hacking STEM Microsoft and find it. There's a pressure sensor that we make into a finger sensor so that as your finger bends, it puts pressure on some velostat, and that causes a changing current. And then with that sensor, you can make a glove that then controls a model hand. The model hand is made out of straws and string and some super inexpensive servo motors like you'd have in an RC plane or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool.
So that one's called Building Machines That Emulate Humans. There's another unit that's built around earthquakes. And so students build a seismograph with a coil of wire, a spool, a cup, and a plate. And then as the magnet moves over that spool of wire, you get a measure of how much shaking is happening. It's a qualitative, not a quantitative seismograph. Sure. And then that plugs into an Excel workbook that we provide and does some nice animations. And then another piece in the earthquakes one is to have students build a model building and then try to mitigate the shaking of that building, of their model building, with a damper, with a tuned mass damper, which is the technology that's in some very tall buildings to help damp down the shaking. Sometimes it's with a big block of concrete at the top of the building, but one of the most dramatic ones is a pendulum. There's a building called Taipei 101.
It's got a big ball, right?
Yep. It's got a big 600-ton ball that hangs down, and that pendulum mass helps to damp the swaying of the building. And so we have a model of that kids can build, and then build the little pendulum and see if they manipulate the variables on that pendulum. How long is it? How much mass is there? How tight is it linked to the building? They can see how much they can damp down the oscillations of their building when you give it a simulated earthquake. So those are some. There's lots more, but it's all around integrating STEM, integrating science, technology, engineering, and math, and doing it with inexpensive materials like plates and cups and cardboard, and then plugging it into Excel that you already have. And the Arduinos cost about $20, but you can use them.
Sure.
And,
now that building counterweight made me think of another movie you can work on.
Oh yeah, what's that?
The skyscraper one where the rock. There's been some stories on it already. Where could the rock make the jump?
Right. Yes.
And but I haven't seen that movie yet. But I'm wondering if they have one of those pendulums or mass dampeners in the movie.
Most buildings don't use the pendulum. It's got to be part of the architecture if you really want to show it off. Most buildings use either like water in tanks up at the top with baffles, so that it'll slosh some, but the baffles help slow it down. Or they do with the big masses that have pistons around them or springs around them, so that they can slide, but they're slowed down by those things around them. But most skyscrapers have some version of damping, because even if you're not having earthquakes, high winds can make those buildings sway enough that people start to get motion sick up at the top.
Well, that's neat, because that's not something you typically see modeled. Where you could put some sensors on. So I think that's a neat activity.
Are you going to marry some of these activities with some movie clips so you can like bring both worlds together?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So far we've used, when we're doing professional development on hacking STEM, we use documentary sorts of things, like an engineer who's gotten excited about building prosthetics from doing the robot hand and things like that. But yeah, we could use some movie stuff. I'm thinking of the robotic hand that Luke Skywalker gets, partway through the Star Wars.
I was thinking of Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes.
Bucky's arm is
Bucky's whole arm. There you go. Speaking of that, so the Avengers movie this summer, were there movies? Let's before we let you go, let's look back this past summer. Were there movies that you saw that you're gonna review, or you're thinking about reviewing, or that stood out for you science wise?
I'm working next on. There's a mermaid movie coming out that I'm planning to see if I can use something out of that. Then this past summer, I haven't actually been to as many movies this past summer as I would have liked to. I started this job relatively in May, so I've been traveling for this job. And now that I have two kids that are, 6 and 8, finding the time to go to movies is not happening as often as it used to.
You can't just take them to the Meg.
No.
Daddy, the giant shark.
Well, there's going to be a Mary Poppins reboot soon, so that'll do the kid thing, and you could talk about flying nannies and other things like that.
Yep. My son, who just turned 6, has been a huge fan of Mary Poppins from the get-go, so he'll be interested to check that one out. He might, it was pretty funny, showing him Chitty Chitty Bang Bang the first time. He was like,
oh, yeah.
Bert, that's not Mary. Wait, that's Bert, that's not Mary. Yeah. No, that's not okay. He was rather upset that Dick Van Dyke was stepping out on Mary Poppins. And
he found a new girl. He's got a car.
Doing chimney sweeping.
Yeah.
He had to drive
But the car is pretty cool.
The song is such an earworm, though.
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Yeah.
Oh, you pretty chitty bang bang.
Don't. Stop it.
Don't do that.
All right, well, we better get going now.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. And we've been reading your column for so long, and thought we'd finally, fellow NSTA podcasters, get together.
Sounds great. And it was a lot of fun to chat with you.
If you'd like to learn more about today's episode, head on over to our website, laboutloud.com, for more information. You can also find details about all the previous episodes, and you can leave us feedback and comments. We want to hear from you.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed on iTunes, Google Play Music, or your favorite podcasting platform. And if you really enjoyed it, consider leaving us a rating or a review. Your feedback helps others find our show.
If you like Lab Out Loud and you love the show that we provide for you, please consider supporting the show at our Patreon page. Head on over to patreon.com/laboutloud for more information. Until next time, I'm Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartell.